I had always heard the rumors about the cabin deep in the woods. People said it was abandoned, but at night, screams echoed from inside, piercing the silence. They weren't ordinary screams, they were high-pitched, agonizing, and filled with pain that wasn't human. My curiosity burned stronger than fear. I packed my backpack with a flashlight, a camera, and a bottle of water, telling myself I was ready. I told my friends I was going camping, but deep down, I knew they would never understand why I had to go. The forest was dense and smelled of damp earth and decay. Branches snapped under my feet as if warning me to turn back. But I pressed on. The path became narrower, overgrown, almost hiding the way from anyone who wasn't meant to find it. The sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows. I froze at the sound of scream, sudden and loud, like someone was being torn apart. It came from the direction of the cabin, making my stomach churn with dread. My heart pounded, and my hands shook. I tried to tell myself it was just an animal, or maybe the wind moving through the trees, but I knew better. Through the trees, I finally saw it. The cabin appeared, half hidden by thick ivy and rotting foliage. Its windows were dark and wet with condensation, and the roof sagged under the weight of years of neglect. The front door hung crooked, held barely by rusty hinges. I noticed deep claw marks carved into the wood, fresh, as if something had tried to escape or enter. A faint wind carried whispers to me, almost beckoning. I stepped onto the porch, the wood groaning under my weight. The air grew colder, unnaturally cold, sending shivers down my spine. Every instinct screamed for me to leave, but my legs moved forward anyway. I touched the doorknob. It was icy, almost vibrating under my palm, and the whispers intensified. "Why are you here?" A voice hissed, soft but threatening. Primeta jumped back. There was no one, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming, as if the cabin itself was alive. I couldn't stop thinking about the cabin that night. Every shadow in my room seemed to stretch and move unnaturally. I kept hearing faint scratching noises coming from my walls. The next day, I returned to the forest with a stronger flashlight and my camera. Every step toward the cabin was heavier, like the forest itself was resisting my approach. The screams had stopped during the day, replaced by silence, but it was a silence that carried its own terror. The cabin looked different in daylight. The windows seemed darker, the ivy thicker, as if it had grown since last night. I approached slowly, and the door swung open by itself. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with dust and decay. The floorboards creaked under my weight, groaning like something alive beneath me. Every corner of the cabin seemed to whisper secrets I didn't want to hear. I climbed the rickety stairs to the attic. A small window allowed a faint moonbeam to spill in, illuminating old furniture covered in dust. The walls were scratched, symbols etched deeply into the wood, twisting and curling in strange patterns. 10 felt the presence behind me, cold and heavy. I spun around. Nothing, but the whispering grew louder, almost pleading. I could hear the faint echoes of children crying and a woman screaming. The attic was alive with sounds of torment from another time, another world. The air became oppressive, pressing against my chest. I tried to breathe normally, but every inhale felt like it was being stolen. The shadows on the walls moved on their own, reaching toward me, twisting and bending unnaturally. I stumbled downstairs. The cabin seemed to groan with anger, the floorboards threatening to give way beneath me. Outside, the forest loomed like a living entity, full of watching eyes. I made it to the edge of the clearing, but the camera in my backpack buzzed. I checked it. Another photo had been taken without my touching it. It was me, standing inside the cabin, but I was outside. I couldn't sleep that night. The images from the camera haunted me, making every shadow in my room a potential threat. Whispers echoed in my ears, soft but insistent. "Come back. Come back." I researched the forest. The next morning, old news articles spoke of disappearances spanning decades. People who ventured too deep never returned, and no one ever explained what they saw or heard. I've returned to the cabin a third time, compelled beyond reason. The trees themselves seemed to guide me, opening a path as I walked. The wind carried faint screams and whispers, pulling me forward. The cabin appeared, exactly as I remembered. The door opened on its own, creaking slowly. Inside, the air smelled metallic and rotten, like something long dead had been trapped there. The attic hatch opened slowly. I climbed in, drawn by some irresistible force. The room was small, suffocating, shadows writhing on the walls like living things. I saw them, ghostly figures, half visible, screaming silently. Their faces were distorted, frozen in eternal terror. They reached for me, begging and threatening at the same time. The scream erupted again, deafening, filling every corner of the cabin. I stumbled, trying to escape, hands clawing at the rotten floor. The shadows swirled and grew, chasing me, whispering my name. I ran to the window and leaped into the forest. Branches tore at my clothes and skin. The scream followed me, echoing through the trees, louder and more insistent with every step. I never looked back as I ran through the forest. The trees seemed to shift and twist, branches reaching for me like fingers. Every step I took, the ground seemed to pulse beneath my feet, as if the forest itself was alive and angry. The screams followed me relentlessly, echoing from every direction. They weren't just coming from the cabin anymore. They were inside my head. A chilling voice whispered my name over and over, soft at first, then rising to a deafening roar. I stumbled, falling into a patch of thorny bushes. The pain barely registered as I scrambled to my feet, desperate for safety. Through the trees, I saw the cabin again, its windows glowing faintly red, like eyes watching me, waiting. The wind carried the smell of rot and decay, stronger than before. I could hear faint footsteps behind me, not mine, quick and deliberate. The forest was alive, and it was chasing me back to that cursed cabin. I reached a clearing and paused, gasping for breath. The cabin's door creaked open on its own, slowly, inviting. A shadowy figure appeared in the doorway, its outline human but distorted, twisting in ways that defied reality. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The shadows around the cabin moved toward me, forming shapes I could barely comprehend. It was as if the cabin and the forest had become one living entity, and I was its prey. The air grew heavier with each step I tried to take away from the clearing. I felt hands brush against my arms, cold and clammy, yet solid enough to push me forward. My heart raced, pounding against my ribcage as if it would explode from terror. Suddenly, the ground beneath me seemed to shift. Roots twisted, forming grotesque faces that screamed silently at me, pleading and threatening all at once. The forest floor opened slightly, revealing a dark abyss that seemed to lead straight into the earth itself. I realized with horror that the cabin wasn't just calling me it. Wanted me trapped. Every scream, every whisper, every shadow had been a lure to bring me back. It had chosen me, marked me, and now there was no escape. I ran blindly, tripping over roots and rocks, my flashlight falling from my hands. Even in the dark, I could feel the eyes of the cabin on me, following, waiting. A scream erupted, louder than anything I had ever heard, shaking the very air, making the forest itself quiver. I finally reached a small path I had noticed on the way in. It led me out of the woods, the cabin shrinking behind me with every step. Yet even as I crossed the forest's edge, I could hear the faint echoes of its screams calling me back at my apartment. I tried to convince myself it was over, but at night, the whispers and faint scratching continued through the walls. Sometimes, I see shadows move across the corner of my eye, and I know the cabin is still alive, still waiting. It waits for anyone curious enough to enter, anyone foolish enough to follow the screams. Even as I speak these words on Unblinking, I feel the pull again, stronger than ever. Some doors, some places, are not meant to be discovered, and some screams are meant to follow you forever. If you've survived this story, comment below. Would you dare enter a cabin that screams? Like this video if it gave you chills. Share with someone brave enough to face the forest. And subscribe to Unblinking for more horror stories that watch you, even when you think you're safe.